Thank you, Rajiv, for joining us. Uh, I think I remember almost 9 years back, we were in an event. I don't remember, I think Startup Bootcamp and all. But 9 years back, RBL was at forefront of partnerships in the market. And I remember him being there and addressing the early stage startups in the ecosystem. Uh, I think before we go into very formal discussion, maybe I want to get a view from you. How has been the journey for 8, 9, 10 years partnering with fintechs? What challenges you see just at high level, and what insights and what energy you have with that?
So, Samir, first of all, thank you for having me here. And, this is an amazing event. I know when you were starting out, there were a lot of questions whether this will become the scale you want. So, to the kudos of the community and you've done a fantastic job. So, I, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I was just looking at my picture here. This is nearly 8-year-old picture. In some manner, I've become wiser. But on a more serious note, it's been very gratifying. So some of the assumptions we had going 10 years, actually, 10 years, that how the business will evolve. And sometimes it's easier to predict 10 years ahead than predict 6 months from now. Okay, and I think what we've been surprised by is the things which are happening every 3-6 months, and you heard from the DDG, Aadhar, and Dilip. And our own experiences of working with a variety of people, some of whom are here, has just left us, astounded positively. So I think if I have to kind of summarize these 10 years for me personally, initially was let 1,000 flowers bloom. We don't know where things are going to happen. Public protocols were still evolving. UPI was not there. Aadhaar had just about started getting acceptance. So let 1,000 flowers bloom, partner with as many people, getting to know what's happening at the ground layer. And I think that's one thing which I believe India has a unique model which is now evolved, where partnership as a way to accelerate the development of the market and your own business. Because, we are a modest-sized bank with about 15 years of new history. We can't think of recreating everything. So I think that ethos of partnering and discovering new areas of business, new areas of risk, and evolving commercial models along the way. So one of my personal success points for me is that the partners we engaged with 10 years ago, how many of them have survived and how many of them have become unicorns or decacorns. To me, that is a victory for the system as well as personally, because if you see your partner succeed, which means in all likelihood, unless you screw up royally, you should succeed too. So these are some of the learnings I've had. Obviously, when one can talk about how I see things today and going forward, and some of the principles will hold. And I think the exciting times are ahead because the the principles on which the technology, financial services being a very basic need of billions of people and getting them into the formal ecosystem, you heard from Dilip and the DDG, is still an unfinished agenda. I mean, one can find 10 more use cases, and when I see the exhibition outside, and maybe 5 years ago, it's vastly different. Go ahead.
No, I think the ecosystem changes really, really fast. I think as a bank, we work with two worlds, right? One is our own world where transitions and transformations are a bit slow, and we work with the ecosystem which is changing so fast. What are typical things which banks sort of should absorb from the ecosystem?
Sure.
And how the agility should be brought to the core of the banking, so that I think sometimes I believe that innovation happens sometimes for the sake of it. So we need to avoid that. So how should we build a culture within the bank so that we can adjust and be fast and slow at the same point of time?
Got it. So I think what we decided very early on, and perhaps that was because of necessity, that we are a tiny entity. We will not know everything which is happening. So please have humility, because the world outside is far more interesting and complex than you'll ever have the time to understand. So humility, and then I think the partners teach you. So I remember middle of 2014, I went in a suit to meet one of the Decacons, which is now there in payments, and he said, "Yaar, koi bank se aaya hai, API banking ki baat kar raha hai." So, that was like a revelation for them, ki, why would a banker in a suit come and talk API banking? Now, today, obviously, we have been blessed because we've learned a lot about how to build the connections. One is the connections of mind, business. The other is the literal connections which technology and usage of services, imply. So I think one will learn hell of a lot if one is open. And being open is not just open of mind, but also of decision making, agility within teams. So one of the things, as things have evolved to much larger scale, is having a alignment within the bank on ops, tech, risk. How does that allow? Otherwise, you can just be, knocking on doors. And one thing I've always, emphasized that if you can't do it, please say no. Because the most precious time for a startup is their time, okay? So say no and then come back when you're ready to do it. So I think these principles have held up as well. Obviously, what was, test and learn in the first 4-5 years, last 4-5 years has become a lot more meaningful. So how do you create value? How do you negotiate value? How do you co-create? Because if you just take today's value creation and partner with a fintech, that may not be enough. Because the world outside is evolving for the fintech and for you. Because the next generation, and again, going back to the exhibition, the same software applications were there 5 years ago, which were very different. Today, they are finely priced and they'll address far more needs. How do you create more value so that there is a continuous process of creation, either jointly or for the customer? So I think these are very important principles we follow. And I can give you some examples down the road of what we've done in specific areas, and a lot needs to be done there.
No, this is good. So I think when we do partnerships in the market, and there's so much of discussions around regulatory compliance risks. So how should we sort of structure the engagement in such a way that it's from a regulatory compliance we are aligned, and we hear so much about DPDPA. So a quick view on how the partnerships should sort of ideally work on both sides so that it's scalable without any risk.
Yeah, so I think, again, this has been one of the major, I would say, learnings for all of us. And I think the regulators made a very good framework on, I think, data, where does data reside for the customer, InfoSec, other areas of risk management, who has the primary responsibility. And I'm talking about regulated versus non-regulated entities. You have in fintechs, regulated entities which have to follow the same process. So I think those rules of the road have become very clear. I remember in 2018, we got very uncomfortable with some of the practices, because people had a lot of, business aspirations which were getting ahead of their capability. And we started slowing ourselves down. And I heard a lot of backlash from my friends saying, "Arey, kya ho gaya? RBL is becoming very conservative." And we were just not ready to absorb so much of quote-unquote innovation, good and not so good. So we slowed ourselves down. We built a lot of practices. Early 20, actually just before COVID, we felt a little relieved that we had the frameworks in place. And also what happens, in some manner, this is the reality of life. People set out to do a lot of things as young companies. They themselves don't have the stamina. And I'm not talking capital. I'm talking stamina of sustenance, mind, building it right, because you, at any point of time, if you're dealing with people's money, whether you are a service provider, tech provider, or a bank, you have to have a very higher standard of, a much higher hygiene. So we felt a lot of people had just exited the business. Also, what's happening is that the commercial value of some of these business models has been severely tested, either by the private investors or by the market. I think that's the other thing which has happened. So I think that gave us, those 18 months gave us a pause to rebuild our tech capabilities, rebuild our operating and risk parameters. So today, we're obviously a little bit more, I would say, it's not like 1,000 flowers bloom. Maybe 10 to what you can do and what you can take to the next level. And then build very robust practices, have a very strong project management. So I remember 10 years ago, it was, yaar, wo aa raha hai, usko API chahiye, de do. But today, that has become very robust. It's almost like, because you are allowing somebody to access the banking system via you, and vice versa, we are trying to access a client base. I think the discipline of running projects, especially when you're dealing with very large. So we also do sandboxes, so where things are a little confined. But I think these have been the big learnings, and I don't think there's anything rocket science about it. But I think it's just ensuring that, your collective names don't appear on the front line in the papers, and therefore, what do you need to do? Because the scale and the stakes are very high.
This is good. So maybe there's so much of talk about new innovation in the market. What are the significant innovations you see which will scale in the market, and how it will impact the banking as such for the market?
So, Sameer, again, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just going back. So I see fintechs and innovation in three parts, and I'm excluding the gentleman who came here and discussed public protocols, because public protocols of every kind have helped us innovate far faster at lower cost. Okay, I think the way I see this evolve is, one is banks being ready to play the back-end infrastructure for large service providers. Okay, so typically payment service providers, and I think we've reached a certain level of maturity, transactions per second, risk management, recon. I mean, one thing as an aside, I'll tell you, with all the talk on digital and technology and straight through, the human being at the end of the day becomes even more critical. I mean, I've found setting up a dedicated service team which focuses on large payment service providers as the winning edge, because they need somebody to talk to, rather than assuming that 100% of transactions go straight through. So I think that's one layer which I think banks are getting good at, and that becomes a business. So for us, just to take a cliche, banking as a service is a large business where we stand as the back end at scale with suitable, DRs, service provider. And, we've had our shares of ups and downs there. Second, I think, is where you are working together with client segments. And there, to your question, I think the consumer end of it is very well understood. So we also have a large consumer-centric business in our cards business. But I think the B2B, especially the B to small b, is a very exciting area, which I think is where we will evolve. Because if you look at MSMEs, where the government is doing a lot more to actually bring them into the Formal 4, GST, identity, cash flow-based lending. We still, as banks, rely on collateral to give larger loans. How can you take a graduated step? So to me, B2B is very critical, and that's where our focus is. So we do a lot of work with TReDS. Now, I don't hear about TReDS being a very revolutionary, format, but I think it's one of the best things I've seen lately, outside of GST, which actually given a kind of been very democratic. How do you get more information about your customers before you give them larger loans? So B2B, in my view, whatever B you decide, whether it's a formalized, on the larger end of MSME or the micro, because I think everybody today is starved of time, is starved of I need it here and now. And I think if you can keep solving for that and the public protocols become easier. Now, I think the ULI will bring property collateral from the state governments. I mean, that is a huge, huge, huge change in the way we'll do our business. I mean, think about it, what we do for Aadhaar, where, it's a 2 or 3 second approval. Imagine if I have to go and get property vetted, that it's in the state government books. It'll just change the way the customer gets money. Today, the customer has to probably go through 10 hoops. Maybe they have to go through 3 hoops. So I think the B2B side. And the third, which I was never, my mind was not there, but I think today fintechs have become real technology providers. So that was what I didn't envisage 10 years ago. And again, going back to your exhibition, I see more fintechs who are actually technology providers. And I would say that in the very near future, they will get into the core of the regulated entity. So I'm hoping that the next core banking system at scale, okay, comes from a new age company, which has gone through the thing. And I mean, no names here, but I know many of them. We're discussing with many of them. So today they're addressing very specific areas of need on risk, on some of your partners here, we're working with them. And then can they get into the core? Okay, so right now LOS, LMS are fairly standard. But eventually, I think if we have to give services at lower and lower price points, this becomes a very critical thing. I'm not to saying the large software off-the-shelf guys will not innovate, but the speed, scale, and API native things they are building is just not possible for somebody, like it's not possible for us to become a fintech given the boxes we operate in. And I would last leave one thought, and I know this is a this is a topic which is being debated and discussed. I think if I have to just take a cliche, the DeepSeek moment for financial services is now on the anvil. I mean, I'm firmly of the belief that what we've done till now is great, but how can I personalize things? The customer layer, the risk layer is still not fully addressed. We are still taking it, one size fits all. How do I? So I think those things for us become, additional part of what we will engage in, and we're already working with many young companies which were born just 2 years back.
Okay, maybe let's get ready for one question or couple of questions from the audience. Maybe the last question from my side would be, you spoke about personalization. I think just a quick view, and you also spoke about how fintechs will operate, right? So yes, banks will become sort of enablers to fintechs, but on their own, their branches, the channels, what kind of engagement will happen there, and what kind of why customers will come to us at that stage, maybe 10 years down the line, also has to be clarified, right?
So I think, Samir, we still, in my mind, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just being maybe too broad here. We still think of, digital, ये offline है या online है. That's not how the customer thinks. The customer goes to the place where he or she gets the service in the manner they want. So today, not many customers come to us for funds transfer, even larger amounts, okay? But customers still come to us, "Arey, mera ye problem hai, I have to add a nominee, and I've become NR to R, what do I do?" I think the human element will have to evolve, and I think this is a broader discussion, maybe 2-3 years from now, what are the roles which will change? I think branches will still be relevant, though the radius of impact of branches will be far larger. Branding will have to work in different ways. I mean, so we talked about trust. We talked about, is your service 99.999? Are you able to give an answer very quickly? How many times do you call the customer कि आपका document नहीं आया, ये नहीं आया, which means there's a failure at your end. I think all of these things will start making a huge difference, because today, hey, if you can't do it, I can do it with somebody else very quickly. And by the way, you don't own me because you have my account, okay? Just because I'm KYC'd by you, because I can get KYC'd by anybody else. I think all of these things will matter more, and you can broadly label it customer experience. So I don't think any time between branches and non-branches, a virtual relationship manager sitting in the back is as important as an RM in the front, depending on the segment you're choosing. A person going into, let's say, a village to give a loan or do payments actually is a bank employee, okay? And they may not be a branch, but if the lady wants to do Aadhaar-enabled payments, she'll go to a Fino outlet. And that is good. So we all have to adjust. We all have to, and this is the problem incumbents like us face, because our entire business structures are still around, branch banking kya hai, retail lending kya hai, cards kya hai. or SME kya hai? I mean, I think the customer doesn't have these silos in their head. So we'll all have to adjust. If we don't adjust ourselves, then somebody sitting out there will make us adjust.
No, I think this is I think what I was thinking actually. I'm taking a session on optionality. So we talk so much about digital, but I still want to walk to the branch, right? So I think optionality is crucial. And I think customers, I mean, the branches, as you said, would be more of a trust building activity where critical competition problems can be solved. It may not be no longer be a sales focused entity as such because customer can sell service. So with this, we can take maybe a couple of questions from participants here. Can we just have a mic there, please?
Yeah, maybe I can start. So thank you very much for the fireside chat. It's been very interesting. My name is Janet Salem, and I'm from an ESG fintech. We provide ESG insights that can be embedded into transaction data. My question is about banks as catalysts of change towards ESG and particular climate action. What we're seeing abroad is that instead of engaging in ESG fintech, a company is now looking to the bank to embed the ESG data into their transaction account. And I'm wondering how you see the role of banks in this ESG accounting and how fintechs like us could maybe more directly support banks to offer that to their clients, especially SMEs. Thank you.
So Janet, no? Yeah, thanks. So I'm sorry, I've not fully, I've not fully fleshed out the answers to your question, but I can tell you that we have been ESG driven for the last 12, 13 years. So we do a lot of things which, are positive, and we don't do things which are negative or which, at least in the form will lead to a problem in the ESG. How can we embed tools and measurements and metrics? And I know some of these things are now needed to establish that you're really making a difference and it's just not paperwork. I don't have an answer, but I think once we lend something to, let's say we're doing some studies on, let's say, microfinance customers and their financial literacy, which is one very tiny element of ESG. There we do surveys, and our surveys are very yesterday's way of doing it. Can we do it differently? We give a lot of climate or green driven finance for, tillers, for pumps, for SMEs. Okay, we do a lot of work at the wholesale on rooftops, C&I. I would love to actually have a way for us to get not real-time data, but metrics which can help us understand that our money and our intent is leading to a few things. And then, by the way, we measure our clients above a certain size, which is about $1 million, every year on the ESG framework before we renew. And this has been going on for 12, 13 years. So, but we don't have the ability to draw data. But I guess in some areas it will come, because when I look at us financing a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, LCVE, NBFC, they have this data very quickly. So I can pull it, maybe we'll think this through. But those are the interesting applications which are here and now. Rooftop is another one. Okay, C&I, which is a little larger, so it's easier to handle, is another one where one can get data to really know where your ESG efforts are going. But very interesting point.
And maybe the last question, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you for providing excellent insights. Anil Tulsiram here. My question is, you are one of the few banks of your size who are able to create credit cards, like you gain 4-5% market share, which other big banks also are not able to do. So what have you done over the last 10 years differently that you were so successful? And some of the points you indirectly already touched, like the partnerships and the technology and other things. So if you can elaborate more on this point.
So Anirudh, there is no science behind it. I think sometimes, as I said, not having a business maybe actually opens your mind to many things. So in 2014, this credit card platform just fell into our lap because we did a small acquisition of RBS's business, and just came to us and we said, "Kya kare iska?" And then we didn't have our own customers. Please understand, most credit cards are driven by liability customers who've been around in the bank, and that's the best way of doing it. But we didn't have enough customers. This is the third, fourth year of our new avatar. So we said, let's work with people around us who have a different level of engagement. So one of the things I learned later was, unka flywheel kya hai aur tumhara flywheel kya hai? Can you give something better? So we started with Book My Show, a few traditional guys, and now it's become a way for the entire market. Because please understand, credit cards were earlier used, I want to buy something, I'll go there and buy it, and I'll use my credit card. When e-com came, then the e-com aggregators, where it's Flipkart, Amazon, Meesho, became the people driving because the payment had to be done at the time of the purchase. Okay, when you buy a movie tickets, we do with Book My Show for 10 years, you don't want to come again and say, I'll pay through a credit card. So if you're able to do it then and there, and therefore a Book My Show customer and an RBL credit card can become a very powerful combo. So that was our thought process, that please let's go to where customers already are. And customers in the credit card world are getting more and more digital. So I think these things have been tested for 25, 30 years. So we were not doing something radical. I mean, co-brands have been there for donkey's years. I think we just took it to a different shape and form because largely we didn't have our own base. So like I said, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think the world has changed. And therefore banks have to evolve, and all banks have evolved. So we're not the only ones. Almost everybody says, can we do a co-brand? Because, you see, the other thing I will say is that acquiring and retaining customers has become the toughest part for a regulated entity because the customer is now making choices. Okay, when you unbundle the customer's identity and credit away from the regulated entity, it just becomes so democratic. Okay, customer owns the data, the customer owns the identity. You cannot say that I'm giving you a bundled product. I'm not saying it doesn't work. But once that happens, we just explode the market. And I think that is what the DDG and Dilip are trying to do. How do you give customers more and more? So credit cards are one very tiny bit which we somehow figured out 10 years ago, tinkering around, ke isko aise karke dekhte hain.
Thank you. I think with this we close. Rajiv, 10 years, and I continue to learn from you. I think whenever I run into some of the thought process, I do reach out to him, ask for help. Some of the meetings were with no agenda, and you have been sort of supporting. So thank you, Rajiv, for that.
Thank you, Samir, and thanks for all this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rajiv Ahuja, for giving us this insightful discussion on how the world has evolved and how banks have to change. May we please present him with a token of our appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for him again, please. Thank you, gentlemen.